So, state of my history is is the title of this video, and by my history I mean the history of the land I live in, state. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about. Let's take it from the top. Our country is like 70 years, 76 years of history, not that long of a history, and it was a very bloody start. So when our country was made, came into being, the announcement of the borders, the borders of our country, was delayed by the British because they knew that it would be fairly bloody and they wanted it not to be their responsibility. So after after power is handed to the respective leaders of each country, the borders are announced. And when the borders are announced, large numbers of people start moving to their designated country. And this movement was massive and very bloody because it was so bloody that trains filled of dead bodies would have arrived on each side, like trains filled with dead bodies of each religion. Like it was very religious based killings. Like so many people were killed just because of what they believed in, and that was just the beginning. And our country is made one day before our rival, our eternal rival as of right now, India. A grand ceremony is held for the creation of our country. And then, a year after the creation of my country, founder of my country dies a year after because he had tuberculosis. And at the time, it was not able to be cured, it was not curable. And he knew that it was not curable, so he told absolutely no one that he had tuberculosis. His own sister didn't even know that he had tuberculosis because our leader, our founder, knew that if people they knew that he would die in 1 year, the creation of my country would be delayed by 1 year, waiting for his death. And when he would die, the country would never have been made. So, to prevent this from happening, he told absolutely no one. And 1 year after our country is made, its founder dies, leaving not even a institution isn't even made. So see how rough a start it is. And that same year we go to war with our neighbor, a neighbor which we share one of the largest borders with. Like there are two main problems with the build of our country. It has two very long borders with rival countries, like one border, largest border with India, and one smaller border with Afghanistan. The problem with this is that we disagree with India on the ownership of Kashmir. We do not, we as a country do not accept their claims on the ownership of Kashmir, and they do not accept our claim of Kashmir, which makes us rival. We have gone to war on this very topic many times, on this very reason many a times, and our beef with Afghanistan is on the basis of the land that we own. Our eastern provinces were initially part of Afghanistan and were conquered by the British, and the Afghanistan government does not believe that our border is what it is. They dispute our territory. Though we have not gone to war on this with them, it is one of the major problems of our land. When our country was joining the UN, there was only one country opposing us. It wasn't India. No, no, no. It was Afghanistan. So, our country is built like a sausage. And one of its other neighbors, Iran, has religious differences. That's why we are iffy at best with them. Now, we move on a few years to our first dictator. And now, this dictator, it's a big jump. We have like a few years of our constitution being followed, quote unquote, but it's not really a good constitution. Our leader did not really make it, our founder didn't make it, so it's hardly followed. Like, the first few years of our country's existence, there wasn't even a constitution. They were just using old laws, old British era laws, as a pseudo constitution. It lasted till the dictator, like a few years before first dictator came into power, and then he ruled for like a few years, like more than 5 years ish. And another thing about our country is that there has not been a prime minister, our highest authority, that has served their term fully. We have a 5-year term on our prime ministers, and there has been no prime minister who has served their full term as of right now. None. So the dictator comes to power. He fights in an election against the sister of our country's founder, and surprise, wins because he's a dictator. And after winning the election, the lady is just banished, just poof, is treated horribly. But then after that, this dictator steps down. Then another dictator, not really a full dictator, kind of dictator, like essentially is a dictator, but we don't think of him as a dictator, so it's kind of weird. But another dictator comes into power, and he brokers a deal with the leading party of that time, one of the strongest parties of modern day. They are still here. So he brokers a deal to have an election where this party, well, a fair election. Then the election happens, and another part of our country, the easternmost part of our country, modern day Bangladesh, has a party which wins the entire election. Even though they win the election, and even though that part of our country provides like 60% of all the GDP at that time, and gets like 40% in return, gives a lot more than it gets, was fairly backwards, and a party from that region won the election fair and square. The party that had brokered the deal with our dictator came into said that this was false. This was a invalid result because the party that had won the election had only seats in the eastern part of our country, which had majority seats. So he made a big hoopla that this election led it to be invalidated by our dictator. So of course, then after it basically fell apart, we went into full-blown civil war. Our eastern part, wishing for its independence, started started declaring its independence and started arming itself. Then we sent a large sum of our military to there, and when we sent a large sum of our military, we lobotomized the entire country. It was nothing short of a genocide. All educated students, well, the majority of them were killed because, well, they were the people who were calling the shots in the revolution. Then, in the middle of it, right at the end, our rival India sides with Bangladesh, modern day Bangladesh, and they start attacking our mainland, our western areas. Well, the modern day part of my country started attacking that and had taken a large sum of our territory, which was bad, to say the least. Fighting a two-way war was a very hard task on our country, and because it could not supply the war efforts in the east, it fell. The eastern part fell and was now turned into Bangladesh. Just before it actually fell, the leader of the party that arranged for the election went to the leader of the Bangladesh revolution and tried to broker a deal, which didn't work. So then, after the collapse, after Bangladesh is formed, our country signs a deal with India so that the territory army had taken from us would be returned. And after another dictator comes up, this man was a horrible person. Like, he was so religious, he had made horrific rules, like barbaric. I've talked about this previously, and I do not want to talk about it again. After during this dictator's rule, the election organizer, man who organized the election, was blamed for treason, because essentially he caused the Bangladesh revolution. Well, the main catalyst for it, and such a big failure had to have a reason to have happened, a person to be blamed. So this person is hanged by a leader of another party, goes to court and gets punished with death. He's still liked, well, to modern day, this day, still liked as a leader, but he got executed. Of course he did. Now, this horrid dictator is in power, and he does horrible things, makes horrific rules, barbaric. Now, this dictator, well, his plane, when he was coming back, got blown up and he died along with it. So, with his death, our normal constitution, but at this point, 3 separate constitutions were introduced, and we were on the 3rd constitution, which is our current constitution, the 1972 constitution. So, after having 3 constitutions in less than 70 years, we continue on our constitution, like it starts back up. And now these two parties, we have now 2 parties. Like, any other party can join, but 2 parties are in power and have been trading seats for several decades now. Like, this would happen. one pa- one party would come in power, then government would collapse before 5 years would before its term would end, and then the other party would come into power, and then its government would collapse, and then the first party would come into power, and this cycle repeated for several years. But then another dictator came into power who participated in the war on terror, which you can see what happened that you can see what happened during that. But then after he fell because he was too greedy and wanted to stay in power, but was ousted and well got sick, and then was pushed out the country. A case was filed on him where he wasn't even in the court fighting the case, but it's still ongoing, a case against him of crime. And well, dictatorship is a crime of execution. If you attempt to form a dictatorship, you will eventually be executed. Now, the leader of the party, the party that arranged for the election during the Bengal Revolution, its leader came to our country and was having a rally, and then in the middle of the rally she gets jumped by terrorists and gets shot and falls down and probably died right then and there. She's rushed to the ICU and then in one day pronounced dead, which is a big shock to the country to think such a powerful leader like this was a part of the the main two parties, like the leader of the main two parties which were trading seats for decades, and she had just died, after which the dictatorship fell, and then the second party, which had ruled for over our country for decades, had came into power and well stayed in power for several years. Then a newcomer came, which was led by the leader of our cricket team. The sports player was in charge of our government. Was the leader was emerging as a new leader, since the other parties, there was no other party which could compete with the current party in power. This party came into the light, and having so much star power because this leader, this sports leader, whatever you want to call him, had the man who won the first cricket tournament for our country, and now he was going into the election and won that election and became the new prime minister. It was expected for him to be the first prime minister to complete his term, but well, COVID hit. All things considered, it was handled fairly well. Our economy kind of crumbled, but I will talk about it in a different episode. So, it was fairly well handled, but after which a vote of confidence was taken twice. First, his party won a vote of confidence, and second time it didn't, because the the government that this party had formed was not composed of one party, because it did not have a clear majority. It was a coalition government with a few other parties which were essential for the government to stay in power, because if the other parties decided that this man was not fit to rule, they could decide for a vote of confidence and then oust him from the government. Now he's ousted from the government, and an election happens, and the other party, first party, which the previous party that was in power comes back to power, and the brother of the leader is now the prime minister, and obviously, by the simple fact that the brother of the previous leader is in charge of the party, you can see how much nepotism plays a role in this. Like, the two main parties are just run by families. It's just pure nepotism. And now we come to present day, which is shaky at best, but is working fine. And the previous government's leader was charged with corruption, and so is in jail. And the current government's current government's previous leader was also charged with, well, corruption on the basis of the Panama Papers, which, if you don't remember, included several very powerful individuals taking part in corruption, as far as I know. So this is where my country stands, and it will be seen how it plays out, how our country's story plays out. Well, that's about it for me. Bye.